Welcome back to Good Day. We got a couple of topics going on right now. Lots of people are talking about. The rules that affect realtors will be changing as of this weekend. And of course, the general election coming up in November is another one.
Both issues incredibly complicated and can be pretty difficult to navigate. So we're welcoming back to the show Michigan attorney Jamie White. So let's start off with what some are calling the bad news for realtors. But what is actually changing here, Jamie?
Well, so the basic change. So first of all, bad news. What the realtors are calling it, I can't say on the air, but it's going to be chaos for a while. In short, there was a class action lawsuit that alleged that there was collusion between buyers agents and sellers agents as far as what the purchaser would end up paying. And so the big rule change is that no longer are sellers agents and buyers agents allowed to negotiate directly based on the MLS, which is the listing that says I'll pay 6%, I'll pay 7%. And the buyer's agent would often see those and then they would bring people to the table. That's no longer the case. And the big consequence for homeowners is that going forward, they will have to negotiate a commission directly with their agent, whether it's 1%, 4%, pro bono. There's a lot of discussion about that. But I think what you're going to see is, traditionally, especially first-time homeowners, they would find an agent. The agent would take them to multiple houses, make recommendations, give them tours. And then when it came time to make an offer, there would be an official document signed that would acknowledge that they were the agent. I know you're going to see buyers agents no longer participating in that sort of hand-holding process. They may recommend a house, but as far as bringing them into a house, showing them around, hand-holding, there's going to have to be a direct negotiation with the buyer before that takes place. And I think that, there are some people that think that's good. They think that's going to bring down the price of homes and it's going to make it cheaper for the buyer. But I would equate that, especially for first-time homeowners or people that aren't sophisticated in buying real estate, the equivalent of, quite frankly, going into a trial, holding a trial by yourself without a law degree. There's just a lot that's involved in a transaction. So, there's a human side to this too, guys, because, at least for me, I've bought and sold several homes, and it's always with people I know, people I trust, people I'm recommended by, so to have to go into that negotiation before you can look at a house, I think is going to be, it's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people, and it's going to bring in flat rate brokers. I'll do it for $500, similar to the billboards we saw years ago. I'll do your bankruptcy for $299. And you get what you pay for. So it's going to be chaotic. It's going to be state by state. Right now, there's no teeth to it. There's no penalties for violating it, short of maybe the MLS delisting you. But their changes are coming. They're coming fast, and the realtors are very confused by it on both sides of the aisle.
I had a couple questions for you, Jamie. I mean, on the one hand, this isn't. We're not starting from scratch here and reinventing the wheel entirely. Like some of these arrangements between realtors and potential buyers, some of these agreements have been in place before. It's not like this is the first time we've ever heard of this. I mean, a realtor will want to have an agreement signed before they spend hours and hours and hours showing a dozen houses. So I guess on the one hand, that's happened before. Maybe just address that. But part two of that question, I guess, wasn't part of the initiation for the lawsuit in the first place the argument that it just seemed to be so arbitrary, like, it's got to be 6%, it's got to be 5%. And a lot of people were like, well, what if it takes me one day to find a house and you're not doing the same amount of work as it takes 4 months to find a house? I mean, wasn't that part of the discussion as well?
It was, and it was part of the discussion. And I think what added to that, guys, is we're seeing, the internet, like everything, has created an environment where locating homes and finding homes has become a different animal. It's the old days of driving around neighborhoods and looking for signs. It still certainly occurs, but there's become an easier way to locate properties. And we saw agents, as you've described, continuing to charge 6% and splitting that fee with the buyer, when in fact, oftentimes, people were bringing the home to the agent. And so that certainly was a premise, and it's a legitimate concern. I think we're going to see a compromise. Again, each state has its own way of doing things. Michigan was not part of the majority of this lawsuit. This was based out of New Jersey. And I think that, I know that Michigan will come to a place where, I think people will be satisfied, but it's going to be chaotic for a while.
This is such a fascinating topic, just based upon the current housing market, Jamie. So, before we move on, one last question on this. It seems like there was an acknowledgement that the housing market has significant issues that needs to be fixed. No one outside of brokerages seem to be able to afford homes today. But it seems like we're going about this in not exactly a way that's going to fix it. It seems like to fix the problem, they're like, well, let's stick it to the realtors. But the realtors are members of our community as well, whereas it seems like overall, the prices of housing we need to find a way to bring those down to an affordable level. So how do you think this is actually going to affect the housing market?
I don't think it's going to affect the prices at all. I know that's the intention, but I mean, this in effect is what we've seen, going back to Richard Nixon, where, there were price controls, and, we live in a free market. And anytime you start to play around with the free market, it usually, at least historically, has had a negative effect, in the sense that eventually that market is going to free back up if you try to cap it. So, the idea that, again, a sophisticated buyer is going to be able to go in and do his own deal and cut out the buyer's agent's fee and maybe negotiate with the seller. But those are far and few between. The majority of people do not have the expertise or the experience to negotiate those sorts of deals. So I think for most people, the prices are not going to be diminished to any significance. And, these realtors, you got to keep in mind, these are not employees. These are 1099 contractors. They wake up unemployed, they go to bed unemployed.
Jamie?
And this idea that you're going to, is to use your words, stick it to them, I think is a poor solution to a problem that you've identified, and that is housing prices are increasing. And becoming less and less affordable. But there are other tools at our disposal, not limited to, the reduction of interest rates and so on. So some good people are going to get hurt by this. And in my opinion, I don't think we're going to see a significant effect in housing prices for the average consumer.
Jamie, let me throw one last question at you about this, because
Sure.
this takes effect, Saturday, this weekend, right? Doesn't it start?
The 17th.
Yeah, it starts pretty quickly here. I mean, we also, to maybe counter your point a little bit and balance that out a little bit, we've also got people who say, well, I can negotiate 3 or 4% instead of 6%. And when you're talking about, round numbers here, a $200,000 house and 5% commission at 10 grand, that really does impact the cost of the house, though. And we're not talking about, a few $100s here. It could be significant.
It could be. There certainly are people that are going to benefit from this, but selling a home, buying a home is a complicated process. From the disclosures, on forward. So there will be people that are able to navigate this, and they'll save 2 or 3%, and that is significant without question. My concern is for the people that think they can do it and end up in a quagmire.
Yeah. That's something I see that's going to be one of the big issues just right out the gate. Is now people are going to be like, oh, well, I can save, on that math, 10 grand, I'll just do it all myself. As someone who very recently went through this process, nope. Unless you are a realtor or have one in the family that you can ask a litany of questions to, it's so it's almost overly complicated nowadays.
Yeah.
There's a lot of complications,
Even the-
but it's not like you have to go without either.
Exactly.
I mean, you have,
Yeah.
again, the
Yeah.
negotiation power
Yeah.
is there now, too.
Even the
right.
forms, guys, you know, they transfer from agency to agency, and you know, those in of themselves can be very complicated if you don't have possession of them to begin with.
Yeah.
Well, Jamie, we had other topics on the agenda, but we just ran out of time
Yeah.
talking about that. So we'll
Sure.
have you again with us another time, Jamie White. Thanks for being here with us on Good Day.
Always
Appreciate
a pleasure.
you, Jamie.
Have a good time, guys.
You
Yeah.
have a
Bye-bye.
good one.